Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for finding time and joining us for Savour's fourth webinar today. Let's give all the other participants 4 more minutes to join us. We'll start sharply at 8:05 p.m. All right, it's 8:05 p.m. now, and we'll be starting now. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for finding time and joining us for Savor's fourth webinar, which is a discussion on the Green Plan 2030 dialogue, sourcing food sustainably in the 21st century. Today, we are exploring the different ways of sourcing food and discussing why it matters. We will be hearing from the panel on how the various sectors work together to promote sustainability in Singapore. My name is Tanya, and I have Simran here with me, who will be the co-host for today's session. Before we start, please allow us to do a short self-introduction. I handle business development and operations here at Savour, where I'm in charge of organizing events like this.
For today's webinar. We hope all of you are having a great evening so far because it's about to get even more exciting as we'll be having an insightful and interesting discussion with our panelists soon. Let me start by officially introducing everyone to Savour. Savour is a tech startup started in August 2019 that reduces food wastage and tackles food insecurity while empowering nonprofits, SMEs, and social enterprises with savings through digitalization via our one-stop B2B e-procurement, marketplace web, and app platform. We connect B2B customers like nonprofits, companies, and school clubs who are interested to procure for their operations, programs, and events for merchants who offer expiring, blemished, and surplus, but still perfectly edible food, as well as regular food, corporate gifts, listed at bulk, charity, and corporate discounts, and apply for in-kind sponsorships in Singapore. Till date, we have over 400 plus customers signed up and over 100 plus merchants on board with over 3,000 plus listings. We have been featured on CNA, Straits Times, Business Times, Money FM 89.3, and many more.
Just a brief introduction to our customized corporate event planning, marketing, procurement, and sponsorship sourcing services. You can engage Savor's team to help you plan your event, programs, or operations, do marketing for it, and liaise with merchants to procure products that fits your requirements, budget, and timeline. You can do so in 3 very simple steps. Just reach out to us via our website, tell us more through our Google form, and await confirmation from us.
So how does using Savour benefit customers? Firstly, we eliminate cold back and forth emails with instant product comparison to get 3 quotes of best value. Secondly, we digitalize manual ordering and collection processes to maximize time and resource savings in the long term. Thirdly, we are a single point for making and consolidating orders and sponsorship. We offer a wide variety, more consistent supply and organized logistics and cheaper than retail prices. With 2-year experience in the startup, we have a prior vetting and review system to ensure optimal merchant performance to build trust and transparency, as well as our team onboarding existing suppliers and sponsors on your behalf so that you can shop with ease. We are tackling food waste and insecurity in a new sustainable way with larger and more effective impacts. Socially, we are empowering beneficiaries with access to a wider variety that fulfills needs. Financially, we are digitalizing manual processes that maximize savings while boosting sales and marketing. We help you publicize and maintain your brand reputation with increased outreach through B2B's publicity efforts for doing CSR. We help Singapore's sustainability scene by conducting checks with the review system so the food consumers eat is safe and reallocate unnecessary food waste instead of throwing it away. Lastly, we manage the end-to-end rescue and redistribution process with our centralized partnership.
Here are some successful customer case studies. Yuhua Community Center for Digital Chingay 2021, Brighton Connection for 2021 CNY event, and Western Union for International Migrant Workers Day 2020, and CNY Community Service Reach Initiative 2021, where we procured drinks and snacks for about 5,000 migrants. And here are some of our successful merchant case studies. Calbee for International Migrants Workers Day 2020, and both Bakers Beyond and Marigold for the CNY CSR Initiative 2021.
For here, we have the QR codes for our social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and our 2 Telegram channels. You can scan them and follow us on our social media platforms to receive the latest updates from us. Alternatively, if you don't prefer QR codes, you can just find us on each platform and follow us there directly. Now, we also have a very special webinar giveaway. Follow all 5 of our Savour pages now and comment done in Zoom chat. The first 3 people to say done win a $5 e-voucher. We will now give you a few minutes to check out and follow our pages. Okay, so now we have 3 people who have commented done, and they're the ones who will win a $5 e-voucher. Thank you for the participation, guys. And now, if you're interested in signing your organization up for a free account on our web platform as a merchant or B2B customer, you can head over to www.savourapp.co to do so. You can then download our iOS or Android mobile app. If you have any questions or want to discuss further, drop us an email at hello@savourapp.co. We have an exclusive offer that is valid till 8th July 2021. Apply Green Plan for $5 off your first purchase at checkout on Savour's platform with a minimum spend of $30. Finally, before we dive into a panelist discussion, we will have a Q&A session at the end. So feel free to send your questions in the Zoom chat box, and we will get on to answering them later. Now on to Tanya.
Without further ado, let's start our webinar now. First, please allow me to introduce you to our honored panelists. Firstly, we have Louis Ng, Member of Parliament for the Nee Soon Group Representative Constituency for Nee Soon East and founders of ACRES. ACRES is a local charity that advocates for an end to animal cruelty in Asia via 5 focus areas, tackling wildlife trade, humane education, wildlife rescue and rehabilitation, cruelty-free living, and community outreach. Next, we have Rachel Oy, Sales and Business Development Lead of A Billion. Rachel is the Business Development and Sales Manager of A Billion, driving the company's commercial development strategy, working closely with businesses globally to grow their brand by tapping into the A Billion ecosystem. Next, we have Rupa Shree Sekhar, Project Lead of Bye Bye Plastic Bags. Rupa is an ardent and rigorous environmentalist who is the leader of Bye Bye Plastic Bags Singapore, a youth-driven organization aimed at reducing the use of plastic bags in Singapore. She's also the Vice President of Earthlink NTU and the co-founder of Hazy Waste, an initiative aimed at encouraging the use of sustainable palm oil among hawkers in Singapore. Next, we have Kay Lee. She's a sustainability advocate and writer who has more than 2 years of experience promoting sustainability in Singapore through actively advocating for causes and engaging in freelance writing. Next, we have Augustine Tan, founder of Ugly Food. Ugly Food campaigns for a zero-waste ecosystem by selling excess or ugly produce, our own branded products, and sustainably sourced goods. Just to give some context about what is Singapore Green Plan 2030 and what constitutes as sourcing food sustainably. Singapore Green Plan 2030, or the Green Plan, is a nationwide movement by 5 ministries: the Ministry of Education, Ministry of National Development, the Ministry of Trade and Industry Singapore, the Ministry of Transport, and the Ministry of Sustainability and the Environment, in order to advance Singapore's national agenda on the sustainable development with targets over the next 10 years. It's Singapore's commitment to the UN's 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda and Paris Agreement in order to achieve long-term net zero emission aspiration. So what are some of the Green Plan key targets relating to food and CSR? Firstly, it is to reduce waste sent to our landfill per capita per day by 20% by 2026, with the goal of reaching 30% by 2030. Secondly, to produce 30% of our nutritional needs by 2030 locally. Thirdly, the introduction of the Enterprise Sustainability Program in order to help enterprises, especially SMEs, in order to embrace sustainability and develop capabilities. The Green Plan comprises of 5 pillars. Firstly, city and nature. Secondly, energy reset. Thirdly, sustainable living. Fourth, green economy. And fifth, resilient future. To us, sustainable sourcing is the act of looking for ingredients that are sustainably farmed, where they are farmed with more than economic considerations in mind, taking into account the environmental and social impact. These are foods that are produced with little carbon and have been transported over a short distance. It is for residential and retail operations, concessions, vending, and catering. Sustainable sourcing of food packaging and ingredients has climbed its way to the top of the agenda for many companies in 2021. These are 7 ways of sourcing food sustainably. Firstly, choosing organic produce. Second, choosing food that's produced in season. Third, choosing locally grown food. Fourth, switching from animal-based to plant-based food. Fifth, having a dietary variety in order to support biodiversity. Sixth, avoiding processed and packaged food. And 7, supporting fair trade. May I invite everyone to share about what Singapore Green Plan 2030 is and what sourcing food sustainably means to you. Perhaps I could ask Mr. Louis Ong to first answer the question. What do you think that Singapore Green Plan 2030 is, and what does sourcing food sustainably mean to you?
Thanks, Tanya. Actually, you gave most of what I wanted to say already about the Green Plan. But I think there's one important part, which is what you mentioned earlier, that we also are trying to now source our food locally. So to get at least 30% of our nutritional needs sourced from local production. And so we're ramping up the farming industry here, trying to set up more areas where we can farm and get our own food here without relying on external sources. And two, which excites me a fair bit, and I know some participants here as well, which is that we're moving more towards plant-based, although we call it novel food. So food that we can rely on a bit more easily. Again, we don't need to rely on external parties through the borders, but food that we can grow locally that's plant-based as well. That's good for us in terms of health and good for the environment. And all that I'm glad is really taking shape this year with the announcement of our 2030 Green Plan that sets really quite ambitious targets that we hope to achieve over the next 9 years. It's exciting times. I'm looking forward to the progress we'll make on these fronts.
Thank you for sharing. Perhaps I could invite Ms. Rupa to share some thoughts about what Singapore Green Plan 2030 means to you.
Yeah, I guess my opinions will be a little more generic. So I definitely do believe like the Singapore Green Plan is like a very ambitious way of for all of our displaying our ambition, Singapore's ambition to making Singapore more climate resilient and also environmentally friendly. And I also believe that this particular plan covers a lot of environmental topics and not just specific to one topic, like from biodiversity conservation all the way to food security, like what we're talking about today. I think it's a great start to greening Singapore, especially with the public sector taking the lead in having more effective sustainability actions by 2025, like targeting high polluting sectors like energy and food. And that being said, I do have, I believe that this plan can be even more further ambitious. So, as a youth environmentalist, I always see, as much as I see like the great sides of what our government is doing, we always have suggestions as to how we can improve. And I believe that Singapore can do a lot more to align to like international standards and requirements to avert today's climate and ecological emergencies. I believe we can have like a lot more ambitious pledges regarding waste reduction, such as like promoting plastic bag tax, which is already ongoing. But I think it would be nicer if we can charge on other disposables as well, rather than just plastic bags, and incentivizing even composting in households, which I have noticed is a very Western habit and has not fully been something that's very normalized in Asian countries like Singapore. Also, more actions by the industry to reduce waste upstream and downstream, like avoiding planned obsolescence in products and instead making and building products that are made to last by making use of EPR, expanded producer responsibility, for electrical goods or even other goods. And definitely, I'm studying right now in NTU, and I would love to learn more about environmental solutions that I can do in my daily life. I'm doing engineering, so I'm not really doing a very environmental course, but I would also love to learn about it. So that would be great if it could be integrated into curriculum in not just universities, even like primary school all the way to JC Poly education. That would be really good if you could learn it from such a young age. And I think lastly, is that my time?
No. That
no,
wasn't
okay.
time. That was my fault. So sorry.
Okay.
Nobody told us there was a bell.
Yeah. So lastly, I think there's also a requirement to focus on like marginalized community to make sure that they are not disproportionately marginalized and impacted by climate change. For example, communities like the low income and migrant workers, and also sustainability policies like impacting delivery riders in terms of like the petrol tax hike impact, for example. So I think the plan overall is very ambitious, but we can definitely do a lot more. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for sharing. Maybe I can direct this question towards Augustine, since you are in the food sustainability industry. Would you like to share how does sourcing food sustainably means to you?
Sourcing food sustainably, in my opinion, has always been about there are a couple of factors. Definitely having 100% local is the best. That's the most sustainable method, because we don't have to rely on any external parties. But being a trade industry, food has always been something that we've been, especially being land scarce, we've been taking over from like multiple overseas countries. So definitely diversifying like our food sources is important. But always maintaining the relationships that we have with the countries that we've been taking from now is definitely one of the key targets that we should definitely achieve as well. Because we are a small nation. If you go to overseas farm and you ask them, basically, even you're the largest importer in Singapore, and you're basically telling them that I can represent the entire Singapore's demand, and let's purchase something from you, it is still a laughable amount to majority of the farms. If we can probably take like 10 containers, maybe a week or two for like certain items here and there, but like if you compare with some of the volumes that other countries take, like China, for example, that volume is peanuts. Like China alone takes 200 containers of chicken like a day, just for one province. So you can imagine the kind of volume that China takes, and the amount of like food that comes in. Yeah. So even if we take a minuscule amount, it's really peanuts. Like a lot of times, food that we actually see has always been in a shortage for a pretty long time. Apples itself has been a shortage for 3 years already. Yeah, we don't feel the effects. It's because we are a rather rich country. As in, like in general, our public or the average citizens have a lot more buying power compared to overseas countries on that side. So definitely sourcing has it's a good plan to actually do something about it locally, for sure, in terms of like ramping up our local production, and hopefully diversifying the remaining of the 70% that we are hoping to achieve else we'd be forced to, I guess, try to produce more locally. That should be the way to go. Yes. So food sustainability definitely is. It's always been a balance. And the food waste reduction side is if you manage to reduce more, you are definitely more sustainable. Or I would guess more resilient in that case. Yeah. So it is a combination of three factors. That multiple prong approach requires every single one, or every single, I guess, participant within the food industry, be it importer, government, or even individual itself, to actually participate in order for us to achieve this goal.
Okay, thank you for sharing. I think like today we have a pretty interesting like round of participants, especially Rachel. Rachel's also from Abelian, who also deals with the food sustainability industry. So perhaps like Rachel, would you like to share a few words about what food sustainability means to you, or perhaps even what Singapore Green Plan means to you?
Sure, thanks, Tanya. Firstly, I wanted to say, Rupa, I totally love your enthusiasm. Keep it up. Well, for Abelian, I'll just give a little bit of background about our company. We are founded in Singapore, even though we're kind of like a social media platform where users can come onto a platform and review plant-based dishes, be it a restaurant or consumer products. It could be food, pet food, it could be personal care, like beauty, skincare, up to clothing, apparel, and so on and so forth. So we've really gone the route of having plant-based be a sustainable option. The reason is why many studies and research, including a recent Oxford study, has said that choosing a plant-based lifestyle is the single best way to basically be sustainable. To put it into context, if you want to choose, let's talk about greenhouse gas emissions, right? We all know beef causes a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. Let's say if you want to choose tofu as your protein over beef, you're already cutting your greenhouse emissions by 25 times. So, that's one way. If you want to think about it, okay, how is this more sustainable in other parts, like a layman's term? Let's say if you want to choose to consume only plant-based vegan food for a day, you save 4,000 liters of water. That's a lot of showers that you have to not take to save. You save 20 kilograms of rice that can feed your family for months, I hope. 30 square foot of forest, which, Singapore, we already have very little of. 20 pounds of CO2, and you save one animal. So I give update. I used to be vegetarian before it was cool for 5 years, and now I'm not. So recently I had the privilege of visiting Acres, which Louis had started. And right now there's 2 broiler chickens there, and I myself have 2 birds. I look at these chickens and I'm like, they are so cute. I'm eating them every day. So that's also another part, right? Also someone has mentioned that we are a rich country. We have these options really available to us. So we really see people going more plant-based. Doesn't have to be fully plant-based, just choosing more plant-based as a more sustainable way to really live our lives. And our app is really to make that accessible, an everyday habit for the everyday person. When we started out, we had a huge following from the vegan and vegetarian community, but as our app has grown to over 140 countries and almost 1 million members, 65% of people on our app actually identify as being flexitarian or an omnivore. So we really believe that people's choices can also make a big impact, because it's about a demand and supply issue as well.
Thank you for sharing. Or perhaps you could like to invite our last speaker, Ms. K. Also, Ms. K is actually a sustainability advocate, and perhaps do you want to share about your experience advocating for sustainability causes and writing about them?
Hi, thanks, Tanya. Yeah, so in addition to what you mentioned, I was formerly, until fairly recently, the a project lead as well as marketing lead at Zero Waste Singapore. So I managed and executed as well as created nationwide campaigns and also did outreach, as well as also obviously connected with different stakeholders on sustainable issues and waste issues in Singapore. So I'm currently at Nespresso Singapore doing something similar, but I just want to quickly say that all of these views are my own and none of them are from Nespresso. So, but I am in my kind of personal life, or I guess as kind of a side hustle or side gig, I still do some sustainability consulting as well as writing, and in my own personal life, obviously do advocacy for sustainability through whatever means. So I think in terms of what it means from sourcing and procuring sustainable food, I still very much come from things of like, because of my NGO background and because I understand how not-for-profits work, I think one of the big things that I still always think about is, as I think Rupa mentioned, the underprivileged communities. So at Zero Waste Singapore, we try very hard to I try very hard to make information about sustainability and especially food accessible to all people. But that's something that's really difficult to do, especially when, you know, Rachel, you're talking about going vegan or vegetarian. That's something that is very easy to communicate on a very large scale, especially to some communities which they have no ability to buy alternatives. And that's a very big issue that, you know, in my own freelance consulting and in my own writing, I try to address as well, because it is something that as much as we would love everyone, I think it's not really necessarily about changing your diet to becoming fully vegan or fully vegetarian, but knowing that you have the option. So like, okay, maybe I don't eat beef on you know, every day, and instead of eating beef or any kind of meat, I have the option of doing something else. Instead of, you know, putting whole milk into my, you know, cereal or something, I have the option of getting oat milk or almond milk. But you have to have the money to have that option, or to have the awareness for that option in the first place. And a lot of the material that I use to translate or to try to make palatable to a larger group of Singaporeans is very, very difficult to do without, in a way, telling them that they have to spend more money, which is not something that I think anyone is in any place to tell anyone to do, especially for underprivileged communities. So I think there is a huge issue, and I completely agree with Rupa that that needs to be addressed, particularly when it comes to, I mean, in my opinion, single parent households, because there is a lot that, in my experience, that we try to educate them on. And sorry, not just single parent households, but also migrant workers, because they ultimately are, first of all, when it comes to educating them, they don't really have an option in their daily life, regardless of whether or not it's about alternatives. They don't really have an option to choose what they have to eat in the first place. And that's actually similar to a lot of single parent households as well, because money is so tight and budgets are so tight that they more or less have to eat what they do, because otherwise they will run out of money for the month or even for the week. And so in addition to that, they will be the first people to feel the effects of climate change. And so sustainability benefits them actually the most, in a sense, because as Rachel rightly mentioned, like a lot of the food that we consume and a lot of the, I guess, things that we don't realize is because we're a particularly wealthy country. So we don't notice a lot of issues that are cropping up. And therefore, when it comes to the people who will notice those issues, they're the people who can do the least about it. So I think in terms of making sure that when we source and procure food sustainably, and when we spread that message, we are taking into account the fact that a lot of the time it has to be not just palatable, but it has to be doable. And for a lot of underprivileged communities, it's something that they really don't have the option to shop that alternative. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. And thank you to all our panelists for sharing. So perhaps like now we'll move on to having a more specific question for each panelist. So the first question will be directed to Mr. Louis Ong. So in your opinion, what's the government's role in food sustainability and the Green Plan 2030?
Thanks, Tanya. I guess obviously we're there to set the policy, set the direction, but I think most importantly, and that's what I like about the Green Plan, it isn't just talking about the whole of government approach, but we're talking about a whole of society approach. And so we've set the direction now, and over the next few months and years, we're really there to mobilize Singaporeans to join us on this journey. And then again, like what Rupa is saying, we are very mindful about how we need to bring the lower income community on board in this journey as well. And that's how we set up the schemes to at least provide some grants for them to buy more energy efficient appliances. If you look at the upcoming the proposed charge for disposable single-use bags, we're very mindful that how it will impact the lower income community as well. So part of the consultation is really how we can move forward with this charge, but at the same time not affect the lower income tax significantly. And so that's part of our agenda really. And I think that's the most important phase now. We have the green plan, and now we need to get buy-in, not just from the public sector or the private sector, but most importantly, the people sector.
Okay, thank you. To follow up, what do you think are the food sustainability trends by 2024?
Well, again, the big push now is going local. And I think that has many benefits in terms of food security, in terms of reducing our emissions, helping to fight climate change. That's a big push. But the other side, who am I talking to? Lots of people. That's Tanya. See, I forgot what I was going to say. Go to sleep. That's the joys of working from home. The other very important thing is what a lot of panelists have talked about, which is really how we can reduce food waste. Because it's an insane amount of food we throw away in Singapore. I think in 2019, it was over 700,000 tons. And that's something that I'm hoping to address. It's not part of the Green Plan per se specifically, but as you'll see coming up soon, it's a public consultation. I plan to introduce another private members bill, which is the Good Samaritan's Food Donation Act. And that really is to help remove liability from companies that donate food to food charities. So that solves two problems, which I think Rupa would like in particular. One, it will fight climate change, reduce our emission, waste less precious resources. And two, the food that is not wasted and donated will help to feed the hungry in Singapore. And we're trying to marry the two together now. Hopefully by next year, I can introduce this bill in Parliament. We pass it. And like how in other countries, this really has led to a reduction in the amount of food wasted. So looking forward to that. Again, do join the public consultation. I hope to get your support for this bill.
Yeah, I just want to, sorry, thanks very much, Louis, for sharing. Just want to jump in here, like, first to say that from my experience working on the not-for-profit sector, I definitely agree that coming on board to the public consultations is a very big deal, particularly because I think it gives people on the ground an opportunity to air their thoughts and also their sort of confusion or concerns with government policy, because a lot of the time, as much as I think the government tries their best to try to communicate it, a lot of the time a lot of the information gets lost. And so people don't necessarily understand, or they, not even if they do understand, they're not entirely sure how to go about executing certain parts of policy. And so I think it's definitely a very good place to let your thoughts be heard and to clarify any things that you don't understand. And as well as the fact that I think in terms of coming from, again, my background, I think food waste is something that Singaporeans understand the most, even more than plastic bags. I think we can all agree that plastic bag battle has been very long, but I think in terms of food waste, it's something that, you know, Singaporeans are very practical. And so I really do think that if we work together on this, it is something that can very quickly, we can see a change in the way that we think about things very quickly, and the way that we, you know, operate in terms of food waste, because Singapore wastes quite a lot of food for such a small country. And we are very lucky that we are very wealthy, because otherwise we will be feeling the effects of this much sooner than later. Yep.
Yeah, you are right. If I could just add a bit more. I mean, we did about 2 months of closed door consultation with the stakeholder groups. And that really opened my eyes to really the amount of food wasted. I mean, there was a wholesaler who sold chickens and told us that actually if it's a little bit bruised, people will return it, and because it's on consignment, they can't sell those chicken anymore and they just throw them away. The salmon, people that sell salmon were saying the same thing. They threw a huge amount away. All these actually are really edible, you know? And we have the luxury of choice. And so even though it's a little bit of bruise, completely edible, we would throw that food away. But again, at least through the consultation, we managed to link up some of the NGOs with some of the I don't want to say food wasters, some of the companies that are throwing good food away. So at least we've solved part of the problem now. But having heard from the hotels, the restaurants, and all, it really is a huge issue in Singapore that we're hoping to tackle. So again, I've done a video for it to try and explain all this in layman's terms, and then to get everyone to at least participate in the consultation. And that really is the sort of the end goal, not just to have legislation, but most importantly, to create this kind of awareness that we are really throwing away that much edible food away every day.
Thank you both, Louise and Kay, for sharing your thoughts and insights on this. It was pretty interesting for all of us. I would now want to direct a few questions to Rachel. So what, in your opinion, are at least two potential benefits for an organization pursuing food sustainability, pursuing food sourcing sustainability, and supporting the Green Plan 2030?
Yeah, so I mean, I've mentioned before, you know, we have hundreds and thousands of reviews on the platform. Of that, we have about 100,000 businesses reviewed globally. We've managed to come up with a lot of interesting data using this broad group of people, not just globally, but also we have quite a bit of like local trends. So one thing is, people are starting to really think with a more sustainable mindset. They are choosing with their wallets. They are wanting more plant-based options as well as environmentally friendly packaging. There's a study that says more than half of consumers who actually boycott a brand that actually doesn't match or share their social and ethical values. And there's actually a huge market gap in a lot of countries in terms of demand and supply, demand of plant-based options and supply of plant-based options. So some of these huge market gaps we see, including countries like Spain, South Africa, UK, Italy, as well as Singapore. So I would say if brands or businesses, if they want to have certain plant-based products or even have more sustainable packaging, they are going to be following the trend. If you don't, you might really lose out in this trend of people wanting to choose more sustainability, or at least people who have that choice to want to choose sustainability. They're really going to lose out in this race if they don't do so. So really, it's for them in terms of their own financial sustainability to choose to be more sustainable in their practices, in their processes, in the products that, or dishes that they produce. Second thing, obviously, I think it's going to help the brand's reputation. And that itself is something that's a little bit more intangible, but something that's going to go a long way for them as well. In terms of what we think, how we support the Green Plan, it's a little bit more ground up in that sense. Obviously we are not the legislators. What we can do is really have that kind of mindful consumption amongst our consumers, and and the thing is, we don't only just connect individuals to the products, right? We can also tell businesses what people are looking for, what's the trend, and really help them to become more sustainable, kind of be consultants. This is how we can improve. How's your sustainability metric like? How are you going to appeal to this growing market that doesn't just include the vegetarians and vegans, but really just people who want to do better for the planet? And I think it's extremely important in somewhere like Singapore, because we don't have many, if any, natural resources besides ourselves like humans. So we want to really be cognizant of the things we consume and the things that we do. So one thing that we had introduced in the app initially was an impact diary, right? And it is just for yourself. Like, what did you do today that helped to impact the planet? A lot of, well, this is generalizing, but I think a lot of Singaporeans are not very aware. It's still pretty nascent, this kind of, oh, I want to recycle. If I'm going to Tapa, I'm going to bring my own boxes. Everything's just about convenience, and people are not very mindful about the way they live. And I think we really have to start changing that, right? Right down to the things we eat, the transport we choose, the aircon we use, all that stuff. Like it's gonna feed into us. I mean, we feel it in a small way. We can feel Singapore getting hotter and every year. And, you know, if you believe in science, you know that's climate change. You know that's global warming. It's hurting us because we're an urban island. There's an island heat effect. And, you know, for us, let's say if something happens in the future, what's our food security? You know, what if other countries don't want to import food to us anymore? You know, we really want to support the green plan as well for Singapore to really be more self-sufficient, depend on ourselves. Again, there's not much space here for, you know, farm animal agriculture. We're not going to have space for cows or chickens. Really, we're looking at, you know, urban farms, growing vegetables, mushrooms, things like that. And we think, you know, supporting local is really the way to go. And yeah, that's how we feel like we want to fit into the green plan and how we as a company support the green plan going forward.
All right, okay, thank you so much. And to follow up, what business value have you seen from your sustainable food sourcing efforts at a billion?
Sorry, can you just repeat that again?
Yeah, I'm sorry. What business value have you seen from your sustainable food sourcing efforts at a billion?
Yeah, because we're not like in the supply chain directly. So something that I've mentioned is we're just trying to influence, you know, individuals as well as businesses to do the right thing. Especially if in lieu of legislation or do better than the legislation has mandated us to do. So one thing that we really want to be seeing is having the alternatives become cheaper and cheaper, right? Make it more accessible. A lot of times we actually don't see the real cost in food, right? Dairy, meat, all this is heavily subsidized by a lot of the countries that produce these items, which is how it becomes so affordable. And in conversely, a lot of the other alternatives are not, and they're all startups, right? They have a lot of costs ingrained into them. Let's say if we are not looking at just, you know, vegetables and mushrooms and tofu and stuff like that. Let's say if we want to look at alternative meats or alternative milks. Sorry, my cat. Yeah. So I mean, see, I also forgot what I wanted to say when my cat distracted me. But we really want to see that the prices going down. So one of the things that we've also tried to do is connect manufacturers of alternative products to other restaurants or other distributors. So in that way, we're really trying to grow not just the restaurant side, but also trying to help to grow the businesses. So that's one way that we're also helping to kind of foster and grow this community.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So I wanted to direct the next question to Rupa. So I wanted to ask, like, what are your objectives and targets of your food sustainability or food sourcing sustainability efforts, and what progress has been made in order to meet your goals that falls under the Green Plan 2030?
Thanks, Tanya. Unfortunately, I don't have cute children or cute cats running around, so no distraction except my face. Anyway, so Bioplastic Bag Singapore is like built on sustainability, and we advocate for sustainable habits for both systemic and individual change. So here we focus a lot on single-use plastics like packaging waste, because obviously packaging can facilitate the safe transit of food, and it plays a very central role in the food system as much as we think it doesn't. I mean, at home, you know, we're all Asians, you know, the Asian culture is to, you know, eat a lot of food. Our parents will give us a lot of food. So it's just very ingrained in us to, like, food waste is just part of our culture, which is terrible. In bioplastic bags, you know, we try to advocate on both packaging waste and also reducing food waste by composting. So we do try to talk about composting whenever we can. Like I said before, like it's a very Western habit. And like what Rachel said, when companies come to us and they consult us about their sustainability practices, we try to emphasize about how, you know, you lose the race, you know, if you don't follow these like relatively new sustainability trends or tap on this new growing market of vegetarians and vegans. And of course, sustainability is not just about packaging. You know, we need to take a broader view. We need to take a lot of steps back and look at the food and drinks in the packet. For example, like ingredients like palm oil and cocoa which are associated with deforestation and damaging natural habitats. So I'm also in another organization which advocates for sustainable palm oil. So I know now the price of RSPO palm oil, which is the sustainable palm oil, there's a spike in it because of the pandemic. So I think this whole thing is a slow process, but hopefully it brings us to this like more ideal world where it's more, we get more local, sustainable, food, and that's the norm here. So other than that, what we try to do other than just advocating, we have programs and presentations tailored to specific requests for companies and individuals as well. We have been able to connect through these programs. We've been able to connect with not like-minded and also not very like-minded individuals and companies to inspire them to take the first step, being more sustainable and environmentally friendly in their companies as well. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you for the reply. So I wanted to ask, what do you think are some of the synergies and trade-offs when you value both the public health and food sustainability?
Okay, so synergies both
synergies and trade-off when you value both the public health and food sustainability.
Okay, so I think in terms of synergy, you must remember that food security is not just like a national security issue. It also ensures, like you said, public health and safety. So we can control the way that we grow our food more closely and sustainably, ensuring that we have a greater public health standard. And obviously this standard must be maintained. And like a lot of the panelists mentioned before, so we are seeing a shift towards plant-based diets with the mindsets of consumers rising, and there's a greater shift towards vegan and vegetarianism. Plus also we see a lot of other companies coming up with very new and innovative alternative options like impossible meat and cell-based meats as well, and generally these plant-based diets are associated with obviously lower risk of heart disease, high blood cholesterol and other health issues. So I think that is what I would say for synergies. For I think the second part you asked was trade-offs. I think there might be some concerns when it comes to medium to long-term health impacts when you consume these kind of like cell-based meats and these kind of alternative protein compared to like real meat. And so it might affect the consumer adoption of so people will be more, how to say, they will refrain from having these kind of things because they'll think twice before opting for these options. And so I think in the end we just need more robust research along with a lot more public advocacy and education, and also we definitely need a lot more space in Singapore. We are very, very limited in space, so I think growing our food in Singapore is definitely a very tough and challenging process. But I mean, it's definitely happening, but with more space and more land, we can, this will be a lot more easier for us. So yeah, I would say that. Thanks for the question, Tanya.
No problem.
Thank you for sharing, Rupa. I mean, pretty much all of us are from Asian households here, and I think we all can agree with how much food wastage is done on a daily basis, and it's something we should definitely start making a change to. And I would like to direct the next question to Kate. So what are some economic challenges and opportunities you have faced during the COVID-19 pandemic?
So I have faced, or like organizations in
your
general?
Organization has faced, the economic challenges and opportunities your organization has faced.
Okay, so currently, as I mentioned, I am with Nespresso, so I'm not going to speak about them. Just probably going to talk a little bit more about from my experience working with other companies, especially smaller businesses. What are those challenges during COVID? So I think in terms of the biggest, sorry, it was just an economic challenge that organizations have faced. Okay, so in terms of I think the biggest economic challenge is because I work and I do some consulting work as well as some marketing and copywriting work and writing work for smaller businesses, especially social enterprises. So those businesses with or who want to have a business that also benefits the community and has and has the three kind of the triple bottom line, so people, profit, and planet as part of their the core business. So what I think the biggest issue here is that because they're small businesses and because they're social enterprises, obviously it's very difficult for them to gain, if they're selling a product, to have sales. But most importantly, I think they are not able to sell an experience. And I think that's something that with food, I have worked with a few different food-based startups, or as I think someone mentioned earlier, like alternative food startups, which basically are like, trying to bring in or create a new type of oat milk, or even alcoholic beverages that are not manufactured the same way and that are a little bit more sustainable or local, created locally. And over my experience, not just recently, but over the past year as well, I've realized that one of the biggest issues is that people don't have trust in the product. And I think, Rupa, you mentioned that as well, like, because of what the perceived side effects are, like, okay, I'm not really sure because it hasn't been tested, because it doesn't come from a big company, because not that it hasn't been tested, but it hasn't been tested enough. It hasn't been out in the world enough for us to know if there are any side effects, 5 to 10 years from now. Whereas if I continue drinking a certain kind of drink or eat a certain kind of food, I know it's been out here long enough. I know that nothing terrible has happened to people who've eaten it, so I can trust it. I think that's one of the major issues when it comes to food-based social enterprises or small businesses, because a lot of them are trying to do things like bring in alternative options. And the issue with not being able to try these alternative options is that you immediately don't trust it, and you inherently feel like it's something that you should distrust because it's something that goes into your body. So I think a lot more awareness needs to be put on these kinds of options. And I understand from the consumer point of view why they might be a little bit more apprehensive, especially if that's really not part of their lifestyle and you're asking them to buy, pay a lot of money, like $20 for some ice cream, which is apparently sustainably sourced, and then they have to just trust you, even though they've never really seen this product before. It might not even be in Asia, it might be from like, a Western country, and it's not something that's already part of their lifestyle. I think the second thing is then supply chain. So let's just talk about the ice cream example, that sustainable ice cream, for instance, just hypothetically. In the past, if let's say there was a transparent supply chain, so you could say, okay, we've sourced the fruits from this particular part of the region of the world, we've sourced the wood that comes on the stick from this particular part of the world or this particular region, and all of those things are therefore why we can say that our item is the most sustainable. So everything from packaging all the way to the way that it's handled. But now, because of COVID, a lot of these small businesses are finding it very difficult to stay transparent in through their supply chain, because it's very difficult for them to, send their products across the world or to source from a specific place if that particular place is not doing so well with COVID or has a lot of issues with warehousing, et cetera, et cetera. So all of these things are things that I think these businesses have issues with, and that's definitely already had been a problem and has been accentuated throughout this period.
Okay, thank you. And do you have any sort of initiatives relating to food sustainability and Green Plan 2030 that the public can contribute to in any way?
So I personally don't have any initiatives, but I think in terms of the organizations that I work with, I would say a lot of these, I would say the public can contribute by supporting kind of the businesses that actually, I think someone mentioned earlier that they work with food that has been kind of thrown out already. So one of them is called Tradeoffs. I think I encourage everyone to check out Tradeoffs. It's a very good business that essentially what it does is, I'm sorry, I can't remember where they operate out of, but it is in Singapore. I just don't remember which part. Basically, in a nutshell, what the idea is that they take food which has looked a little bit bad or has some sort of issue that cannot be sold commercially, and they take that and then they sell it to a community of people who are okay with taking food or whatever it might be, prawns or meat or whatever, that doesn't look the best. And then that's something that I think on a public scale is very easy to contribute to, because you don't actually have to volunteer your time or anything. And I know that can be quite challenging, and coming from a not-for-profit background, I understand how difficult it can be for people to volunteer consistently. But in this case, it really is just like whenever you want food or whenever you want to if you want to try something new, you can always just give it a go and see what they have out there. And then hopefully it would also change your mindset to think twice about being so particular about the food, because it is a very big issue that, you know, and having worked with these supermarkets and these food sellers very closely over the past few years, one of their major issues is that customers complain if it doesn't look good. And these types of initiatives should be normalized so that people understand that you know, food doesn't have to look perfect for it to be eaten. And if you have the abundance of choice, you become a little bit more greedy and picky. But at the end of the day, it's really just all the same, as long as it's not rotten or anything like that. So I would definitely suggest for people to check out Treedots. It's one of the easiest ways to kind of integrate yourself, or, you know, if you live with your parents or your grandparents or whomever it is, that maybe is not so keen. It's kind of like a wet market, but for food that doesn't look so great. So it's something that they can understand without, like, you know, trying to tell them to buy oat milk or something. Yeah, so that's something that I think is a very good introduction to the world of food sustainability.
Thank you for sharing. I really like how you mentioned about how some of the challenges includes about how people should have more awareness, and also definitely having a more transparent supply chain.
Yeah.
In terms of like the Treedots, I think sorry, I think like a way that Savour also helps to combat this food wastage problem is definitely to sell these near expiring foods. Also definitely a way to like reduce this food wastage situation in Singapore, and definitely Treedots is also an excellent company.
Yeah.
So I want to direct the next question to Augustine. So for Augustine, like how, why, and what is agri-food's role in creating a sustainable Singapore when it comes to food?
Okay. I may sound incoherent. I'm my 8 cup of coffee, 3 hours of sleep, so I'll try my best to answer as much as possible. I really hate June. It's the seasonal change period. So agri-food's role has always been in terms of educating people. We specialize in the fruits and vegetables area. Out of all the food departments that we have so far, we do touch a bit of dry goods and the rest. No meat, no seafood yet. But essentially, we do rescue, or I would say we do buy and educate people in terms of what can be edible, what can be not. Like what ugliness is actually edible, what ugliness is actually spoiled. So something we realized very long in the food industry is that wastage, a lot of wastage actually comes because people in general don't accept the ugliness due to various reasons. The easiest ones to convince are the ones that are people who always think that certain form of ugly scar is actually because there's something wrong with the fruit, or the fruit has some issues where it's actually skin or surface damage. So these things are actually still a lot much edible. And that's where I guess UF comes into play. So we are a lot more like an educational grocery store. So we have initiatives like creating comics, which very heavily touch on what can be edible, what can be not. So infographics such in a way like that. So like if orange have a certain kind of scar, or a deep circular scar that actually might look very scary, but it's actually caused by insect, like one of the moth nymphs, and that just is a surface level kind of damage. So it's still edible. So we do subtly. We've always been taking, I guess, with this year we've been taking a very subtle approach in terms of trying to advocate for sustainability. In the past, we were always very loud, like safe the environment, do this, do that. We realized that they didn't really work very well with grocery sections. The easiest way was to actually just try to create a product, or create something that actually works with a day-to-day life, someone's day-to-day life kind of routine already. So whether or not they know that they're helping the environment consciously or unconsciously, they're actually already assisting us in saving the environment. So one of the methods that we actually do that is having like fruit bundles or vegetable bundles in such a way that they actually can't really choose what's inside, but everything that's actually inside is the access for the week or the access for the month for certain importers and suppliers, either rejected goods or just basically buffer stocks that happen. And I guess the consumers, they probably know that the bundles itself is just more worth for value. We realize that actually that's more effective in terms of converting a couple of the, I guess the main bulk of the main mindset of the population because it's easy to convince someone who's already very who already sides with environment policies very or is very environmentally conscious, put it that way. Because it's just generically, if you just tell them some environment message, normally they will support you. But for people like my mom who are less cautious about environment, they're less cautious about saving the environment and more supportive towards price and cost effectiveness. Going that path actually helps a lot more. So that's something we learned on a very early age. So because of this, we're actually able to really help and save a lot of the importers access that they gotten from various reasons, either supermarket rejects or simply the ugliness of basic buffer stocks, or sometimes even just over ordering. Because the funny thing about the food industry is a lot of it's still manual, and there are human errors where instead of buying one container, you can add an additional 0 by accident, and that's it. Or you accidentally put 1 month, and then suddenly you get 10 extra containers that comes in. So this is the key concepts that actually do happen within SG market, and that's something that I hope doesn't happen that often, but it does. So this bundles really assist a lot in clearing buffer stocks, because it can be anything for that week itself. Like it's no longer about having a set demand. It's now a flexible demand, which it's extremely useful with flexible supply. So I guess that's where Ugly Food's main role actually comes in on that section.
Okay, thank you. Like you mentioned about how you have created this educational comic strips, and actually it has been quite prevalent on some of our social media ads. So actually I wanted to ask a follow-up question. So for the audience, how do you suggest our audience to start tapping into the food sustainability sourcing scene and being part of the Green Plan 2030?
I think the easiest way to do that is on your own, even if you don't shop with one of the sustainable platforms. You can basically just go to any retail store and simply, instead of having a set list of items that you want to buy, also be open-minded enough to ask what might the retail store actually need to clear for that week or that day itself, because it really helps a lot. Like the model that we approach in this format, where it's flexible in terms of demand formats, we can easily save 1 ton of food with about 100 bundles. So that means it's about 10 kg each bundle. Yep, around there. So that's the amount that actually can get saved just by 100 people alone. So you can imagine if 100 people is a really, really small amount of Singapore. Just imagine what 1% of the population, or even something smaller than that, can do to save the amount of food wastage that the buffer stocks comes in. Because at the end of the day, food and SG, if you want to talk about wastage, it's always been how much that comes in and how much the country really consumes. You can't really ask. There's a set limit that the population can really eat. Any form of overconsumption causes other kind of problems like diabetes and so on, which is not something that we want to encourage. So there is definitely a set amount of demand that is there, in terms of how much the whole population can eat. What's really important is actually the juggling between what is on excess that week and what's not on excess that week. Because so that if we give a very simple example of, let's say apple oranges, it's a very similar product, but if apple is excess in that week, you do need to switch the orange supply towards converting the demand from orange to apples to assist the apple section first, and then hopefully it sends a very good signal towards the importers to actually stop bringing so much apples on that side, so that they can counter-react against the entire industry. Because it's not possible that if you bring in 1.5 times, let's say you just random number, 1.2 times the amount of the food Singapore needs, that 0.2 times is not going to go anywhere. It's not going to get miraculously disappear just because you don't need it or do anything around that line. It only disappears when the importers themselves actually cut the next order. So instead of bringing 1.2 times, they have to bring 0.8 times the amount that Singapore needs for it to actually really reduce. Else it just going to circulate. What happens is that the waste just circulates to the next wholesaler, the next importer, and it just moves on down the chain. Because importer A will just, if importer A is selling well and importer B is not selling well, importer B will slice its price. Importer B will then probably be selling better. Importer A will then have to slice the price. This chain just keeps going on and going on until the food expires and just gets wasted. So it doesn't really do much of a difference in terms of assisting food wastage. So the best method actually on the industry level is to switch really short shelf life products to something, balancing the demand for very short shelf life products with something that's longer lasting. Something like apples or oranges compared to like things like mangoes and bananas, which only last 1 week, compared to apples, which last 3 weeks to 4 weeks, depending on how the storage happens. Yeah, so there are multiple ways to do it. But food wastage has always been, and in my opinion, really about a balancing game. It's always like a weighing scale, and you just have to balance out like the demand. Yeah, because the supply will always be there.
Thank you, Augustine. We now have a Q&A session, and I've seen a lot of participants have sent in their questions in the chat, so we can get to it. So one of them is, does food sustainability mean adapting a plant-based diet? Now, this question is open to any of the panelists who wish to share their thoughts on this question.
Sorry, what was the question again?
Does food sustainability mean adapting just a plant-based diet?
Maybe I'll just jump in and take that question. I think food is very important to all cultures. When we finish breakfast, we think about what we're going to eat for lunch. When we eat lunch, we're going to think about what we eat for breakfast. When we dinner, when we go to bed, we're thinking what we're going to eat tomorrow. So I think what our company at least tries to advocate is not like, oh my gosh, like everybody, you have to be plant-based, otherwise you're not sustainable. That's a very like divisive mindset, and we want to be a very inclusive community. It's like, let's just be mindful of our consumption. And I think a lot of what was mentioned today was about education. So it's a lot of things just people just don't know. They don't know that, you know, for example, whatever they're eating is causing this A, B, C, D, E, F kind of like domino effects. You know, also sometimes it's not priced in, like they wouldn't know. They'd be like, oh, you know, this chicken is like super cheap. Like I heard it's good for me, it's low fat. And that's all they know, because that's what's been like the popular kind of message that's been lobbied by, you know, like big brands, big corporations, you know, even governments. So really, I would say choosing to be mindful about your lifestyle is the way to go for sustainability. And in terms of food, right? It can be even, you know, if you want to choose meat, like what's the best type of meat you want to, you know, go forward with. Maybe you want to choose something that's, you know, organic, grass-fed, you know, they are happy on a farm, you know, then that's your choice. Obviously, like what we want to do is have people choose more plant-based, but you don't have to go fully plant-based. Again, it doesn't have to be very, very expensive. You can always eat very clean foods, things that you cook, that, you know, instead of, again, going to the beef tofu thing, instead of eating beef, you don't eat Impossible. We all know Impossible is more expensive because it's the more expensive option at restaurants. You choose something else like tofu or beans, which actually is not very expensive compared to, say, beef. So it's choosing the alternative that's best for you. You can choose to just live a more mindful lifestyle that works for you and your culture and, you know, your social preferences. And that's sustainable, right? It's better than saying that, oh, I'm going to go vegan for a week or a month, but then after that you're like, it's too hard, I'm going to stop. It's like going on a diet. It has to be sustainable for it to work out in the long term, and for everyone to really drive this as a movement. Because I think Augustine also mentioned it's a lot about demand and supply, right? If we're demanding a lot of one thing, the producers are going to keep producing it. It's going to keep stressing the environment in some ways, assuming there's no obviously government intervention to lower or increase prices. But if we're demanding something that's very not sustainable, then the producers are going to keep producing it because, you know, a lot of times, again, businesses only see profits. So it's about the financial sustainability for them. They will see it, whatever it's going to make them most money in the short to medium term. But yeah, sorry, that was a long-winded answer, but the short answer is no, you don't have to be fully plant-based, but just be mindful of your consumption.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe I'll add on to that a bit. I mean, that really is the goal. I don't think it will be a day where everyone is eat plant-based food, but I think we can move towards more plant-based meals here in Singapore. But there is an issue of cost, which many have rightly pointed out. I mean, this point in Singapore, the plant-based food does appear to be more expensive. But I think if you look at other countries, England, for example, they have reached a sort of a point where the plant-based food is about the same price as the meat. I think Tesco's is selling the plant-based meat now. It's almost at the same price as the actual meat. So we can reach there with a bit of awareness. And I see that happening in Singapore, where more and more people are going for the impossible, the beyond. And that's a good sign of hope.
Yeah, I can jump in as well, I guess. So for price-wise, for a lot of the plant-based meat, I think with the trend that's going forward, it should reduce to somewhere of a normal meat pricing, hopefully, around that. I haven't seen the numbers in terms of like what it might trend out to again, because at the end of the day, it's basically cost and supply. Cost and finance, as in like money, how much money is injected in. For Southeast Asia, I've yet to see like a big factory coming out, which I think in the region itself will probably be in Thailand, because that's where majority of the subsidies for manufacturing actually happens for food. But I think once that happens, it will probably reduce the costs in terms of like plant-based meat around Southeast Asia especially. So that's something that we're looking forward to, because if I'm not wrong, today the plant-based meat that we have actually imported from factories from really, really far places around the world, compared to Singapore region itself. So locality is probably something that they might look at once the demand itself breaks at a certain point where it makes more sense for companies itself to start their manufacturing plants within the region. So that's definitely something we look forward to, and yeah, definitely agree that I think within a certain set period, even if 30% of the population actually reaches like a vegetarian or more conscious vegetarian diet like once a month or so, it will definitely actually really help the situation itself, that's for sure. Yeah, because for meat side, the majority of the meat countries today are very manpower intensive. With the virus and everything, it actually really affects the prices. So prices for meat, pure meat itself, has been going up steadily since the pandemic has occurred. They've always been the most steady in terms of prices, like frozen meat especially. But yeah, because of the virus and how unpredictable it is, a lot of those cheap countries that we take from are actually suffering in terms of virus, right? So they're not producing enough. Yeah, so yes, it will reach to a point where plant-based meat will actually become more of a norm.
Thank you for the answers. There's another question from the public here, from Michael. So Michael wanted to ask that, given that most companies and individuals can't really make proper sustainability decisions without data and information, how can digital transformation and innovative technologies help in reducing food, packaging waste, and resource efficiency in Singapore growing agri-tech culture?
I'll take the part about data, which is what we are looking for currently. So if you've seen, we're now collecting data on food waste. Those that produce a lot of food waste are now required to submit the amount of food they waste, as well as also the past few months we've announced, they're also required to now segregate their food waste. And up next will be about reporting the packaging waste as well. And that will ultimately lead up to the extended producer responsibility for packaging waste as well. So that's one thing where we're short of, and that's why we're going out the next few years to collect data on this fuel waste stream. And then at the same time, asking the companies to also submit their plans for how they're going to reduce the amount of waste they're generating. So that at least will set a baseline data that we can collect and then see how we can improve over the next few years. Digital, I think there was a Singapore company, right? It's really quite an interesting tool they created where the hotel just throws all their buffet leftovers into this thing on top of the bin that they've created, and that equipment can tell you what food you have thrown in, how much wastage, and then from there, it's a local company, and then from there the hotel can see actually they threw away so much chicken curry, and they will produce less for the next buffet. And that was really quite good. It was a CNA documentary. I'm afraid I can't remember the name of the company, but it uses AI as well, which is very interesting because that thing can just tell what food you threw away, you know. And then it learns as well. As you keep throwing and you tell it this is chicken curry. This is how using imaging can tell what you throw away. And that really, again, married a lot of things together where technology kicked in. It's very simple for the hotels to then, no extra effort, they still throw the same food into the bin. But now they get some data on what food they're sort of cooking in excess. They reduce it so they waste less money, they waste less food, and then it really is a win-win thing. I'm not sure if someone knows what company that is.
Are you talking about Raina's company? Is the founder Raina?
I really can't remember.
Okay. If that was the company that you're referring to, I believe they recently changed their name also, so it's a lot harder to remember as well. If I'm not wrong, the new name is called Luminatrix.
Yeah. Luminatrix, okay. It was a bunch of students actually that created this.
Yes. Yeah, I believe is them.
Okay, I think we're both sleep deprived today, so don't trust us on this. Us the younger folks here, see, look at our eye bags. Or someone Google it. But it's good. I mean, it's technology like this that will help make a difference. Someone Googled it. Lumitics. Okay.
Yes.
Augustine, someone really didn't trust us, by the way.
Which is good. Yeah. My face isn't listening to me. Like my eye bags are tipping lower than what I can smell.
Thank you for the reply. So there's actually another question that's being posted inside the group chat. So I think Nilofa Aya, she asked, she said that it's important to start educating the younger generations when they're very young on the right roads in terms of environmental awareness and food sustainability. So how do you think that we should educate the young in Singapore about food sustainability?
I guess I can take this question. Oh, sorry, it was someone else gonna go?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rupa. I've spoken too much already.
No, not at all. Yeah, I think, like I said before, it's very important to integrate environmentalism into curriculum. So I think even, I think last year I conducted this like exercise with a bunch of secondary school kids. It's a very simple exercise, just basically get them to go to the supermarket and ask them to buy sustainable foods with a limited budget and a limited time. And what I saw that this does is, obviously they want to win, but not just that, they also, they learn that there's sustainable food, right? Like they're super accessible to them. It's not like we have to go to like a very, atas place to get these kind of stuff. Like you can just go to NTUC and you can find these kind of things. And also, I think a very good habit to inculcate into young people is to read ingredients, to find out what you're eating and what is sustainable and what is not sustainable. As for food sustainability, something else that I sort of did with younger kids, primary school kids, is like to show them ugly food and show them, more aesthetically pleasing food, and kind of like get them to understand that both are practically the same and both are just as edible as each other. And I know some schools are already doing some planting initiatives and stuff. So I think we can go beyond that. We can do more things on like composting, which can be quite a fun activity. So basically, I think it's according to level. So talking is to more like university, JC, poly level, I think we can have like compulsory lessons or modules on environmental and food sustainability. And in the end, all of this we can teach, but I feel like schools must also be a very good role model in these kind of things. So like on campus, you must make sure that your food is sustainable, make sure that you have food that is made using sustainable palm oil or more vegetarian or vegan options, which is something that I've been advocating in my school on campus for like 2 years. When something that I learned from that is that some schools tend to be quite resistant to these kind of things. Like it's a very, very slow process, but you have to keep fighting and eventually you'll get there. So it would be great if like MOE they could consult green groups into like how they can structure their curriculum to get students, especially younger students, to learn about environmental and food sustainability. Yeah. Thanks for the question, by the way.
I think that's a really good question, and Rupa gave a pretty good overview. Just want to say, like, from my personal experience working with schools as well, it's not just about the students and not just about the education awareness. It's kind of like has to go hand in hand with what parents do at home as well. So one of the main things that we find out is that, you know, a lot of kids, they learn how to recycle, or they learn, you know, how to do certain things, and then they go home and the parents don't do it, or there's no infrastructure. So you know, the school tells them, okay, cannot use plastic, must bring your own water bottle, and they usually do it, and then they kind of get to secondary school and then they're like, oh, but there's really no, because when you're a kid, I guess your parents pack your bag, so they also want you to bring a water bottle. Then you get older and then that sort of like doesn't have it anymore, and then the school stops teaching them and the parents stop telling them, and so it's kind of a very difficult thing for them to remember because the infrastructure for them isn't there. So I think one of the things aside from that is like it's also very hard, you know, because kids have so much information they have to deal with, and so it's hard for the schools to, I mean, I think all of us learn how to eat healthily at schools, and, you know, don't eat this and don't drink this drink, but I can almost guarantee that 90% of the people in this world have forgotten what is like a food group. So it's kind of like one of those things where as much as the school can do stuff, it has to be an infrastructural thing, and sustainability cannot just be part of an education, it has to be part of a lifestyle, if that makes sense. So, you know, even if we teach kids, and yeah, it's true, a lot of schools have started to create like farming initiatives or like little gardens, but it doesn't really, I guess, have the same impact as if when they go home and then in their daily lives, you know, when their parents are able to do something about it. Or I guess with NEA sending out all the, you know, seeds, everyone can have their own house garden as well. But all of these things kind of need to come from both home and the school, because otherwise it's just impossible for them to learn anything. And even for, you know, adults, it's very difficult for us to always remember to bring our bottles or always remember to do certain things. And if it's so hard for us, it's even more difficult for kids, you know. And I think the other issue is that just in terms of accessibility, yeah, as you mentioned, a lot of people think you have to go to like, you know, source foods to buy things and in bulk or without packaging. But a lot of the time, if you go to even your wet market, which is something that a lot of people don't know, you can also do it there and be sustainable there, because all it does is just take away packaging, which is a huge part of you know, being sustainable. So that's something that I think in terms of education, maybe not just for schools, but for everybody, we need to do more of. And to not, I guess, sustainability in a good thing and a bad thing has become a trend. It's good because I guess people want to jump on it, but it's bad because it's perceived as something that's very expensive. But the reality is that there are a lot of things that can be done very cheaply, and that's something that education has to come from a young level, but ultimately has to be supported at home and then in the wider community as well.
Okay, thank you all the panelists for your insightful answers on to all the participants' questions. However, now due to time constraints, we are going to wrap up the Q&A session. So thank you for the enriching sharing. We as moderators have certainly learned a lot of new things, and we hope the audience have learned something new as well. I would now like to invite the speakers to each share one key takeaway that they would like the audience to remember.
I think you have to arrow someone.
Okay, yeah, sure.
And
okay.
it cannot be me. I've been the first of every single time.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for this one, like
Not fair.
Rachel. I think perhaps for this question, perhaps like Rachel could share one key takeaway.
My key takeaway for the audience to bring back, well, I guess my key takeaway, if you are an individual, is to be, again, you know, more mindful of your lifestyle choices. And if you're a business, you can think about how you can best capitalize on this trend while still contributing to the planet. Yeah.
Thank you. Then perhaps for like the next person, would Kay like to share her key takeaways?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tanya. So I think a lot has been said about consumption and how we can make things better. And then I am looking through the questions now, and a lot of the questions have also been about how do we educate people, or how do we convince people about something, and along those lines, or to embrace sustainability. I think the key thing is not really to convince anyone, but for us to start with our own mindful consumption, so that aside from just saying like, okay, we should change our diet to this, or have plant-based meat, or any kind of change in lifestyle, like take Dabao containers or whatever, it just all comes from an idea of mindful consumption, that we are just aware of how our consumption impacts the planet. And hopefully that is something that people can see through our actions, and that's something that they can also pick up on. And it's also something that I think someone mentioned as well, in terms of whether or not it can be a sustainable action. Being mindful of your consumption is always sustainable, because you can always tailor it, not necessarily tailor it to your needs, but tailor it to how comfortable you are with doing a certain thing as well.
Thank you for the answer. Perhaps for the next speaker, would Augustine like to share?
What was the question again?
Your key takeaways that you like the audience to remember.
Oh, yeah. I guess the key takeaway here will be, the more flexible you are in your choices, the faster we will reduce food wastage. Yeah. The more set in stone that you have in mind of buying certain items, then yeah, that causes more food wastage.
Definitely. For Rupa, would you like to share your key takeaways?
Yeah, of course. I think for me, it would be that we should be very aware of our privilege, like check your privilege, and like look beyond your own communities. Like in Singapore, we are very privileged in the fact that we don't really see these like effects of climate change coming so clearly as they do in like other developing countries. So we need to be very mindful of that and know that things are worse off elsewhere, and we have to put in effort here so that it reflects all over the world. So change your mindset and try to get out of your comfort bubble and put in more effort into having more sustainable habits in your daily life.
Thank you. So for the last speaker would be Mr. Louis Ong. So would you like to share your key takeaways?
I guess the key takeaway for everyone is that just remember that you, as an individual, you can make a difference. And I always end with this quote, which reads, "I'm only one, but still I'm one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do." And each one of us can make the difference. That maybe won't change this world overnight, but slowly when everyone starts doing it, this world can become a better place for all. But, thank you so much for organizing this event. It really has been a pleasure listening to everyone and chatting with everyone.
Thank you. It was a pleasure having you, and it was a very engaging session.
It was indeed very engaging and insightful. So thank you to all the panelists. And we would now have a photo taking session. So requesting the participants to please turn on the cameras. Okay, so I'll now give the cue. 3, 2, and 1. Okay, thank you everyone for putting on your cameras and for being part of our photograph. over here, we have the QR codes for our guest panelists. You can scan and follow up with them if you are looking for potential collaborations or want to discuss any further insight.
With that, we have come to the end of our 4th webinar. So before you go, we have sent the webinar feedback survey Google Forms link in the Zoom chat. Please kindly fill it out right after this webinar so that we can constantly improve for our future webinars. Thank you to everyone for joining us this evening, and we hope that you have a great night ahead. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Good night, Augustine.
Yeah, good night. Good night,
Make
MP.
sure you go and sleep. All right,
You
good night.
too, you
Bye-bye,
too.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Rupa, say good night to Hema for me.